Right. Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. We're on the Red Pill Religion channel, and we're going to be doing our debate, show here. And I have with me our two debaters. The topic is going to be: is Christianity more logical than atheism? Josh Brister and who is a member of our team, and Randolph Richardson, who is you are president of Canadian Atheists. We'll start with Randolph first, and you can introduce yourself.
Oh, hi, I'm Randolph Richardson. I'm with Canadian Atheists, and I was invited to this debate by Josh, and I'm looking forward to where this goes. Thank you very much for having me on.
All right, and Josh.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is Josh Brister. You can find me on Twitter, Apologist Supreme. I love to debate. I've been really, I've been training for the last, I believe it's over 21 years now. And I think it's very important that we discuss these issues in a cordial way. Maybe we can find some common ground.
All right. Yes, and that is very much the what I share with both of you. I am the moderator, Jean Baptiste. I do have a bias. I am Christian. I'm not going to take sides in this debate, but I am letting everybody know my personal bias. So then that way you can criticize me or congratulate me, however well I moderate today. But I do. We do want to start with definitions first. So we'll start with Mr. Randolph. Can I call you Mr. Randolph or just Randolph? Or
Randolph is fine.
Okay, and we'll just start with Randolph, and then after Randolph is finished, Josh, you can go.
Okay. I've been trying to clarify the meaning of atheism because I've noticed that there has been some misunderstanding of it. There's the definition that I use is one that I consider to be the standard definition, which is the absence of belief in deities. It is supported by linguistic structure. It is supported by the etymology, and it is supported in other ways as well, such as common usage. There are some dictionaries that in the past did incorrectly define it as the doctrine that there is no God, and I am one of the people who've written to the dictionary companies, particularly Merriam-Webster, who in December of 2018 and January 2019, they updated their definitions so that they're a lot better now and more consistent with the etymology that they cite. In the past, they had that definition with the etymology that disagreed. The Oxford English Dictionary always had the correct definition on that. So, but I don't mean to emphasize a lot on the definitions in the dictionaries so much, but just as the common usage. One of the ideas that I have is when there is a lot of disagreement on the use of a certain term, then it can be useful to go back to the etymology and use that as somewhat of a guide. There's the concern that I have is I've encountered a lot of vilification, attempts to vilify atheists. And so by fixing up this definition, making sure it is put through correctly, I think that can help a lot. It is sometimes conflated with anti-theism or even mesotheism, with the anti-prefix meaning opposition to, it's an actual position, and meso being a position of hatred. The M-I-S-O it's spelled. The atheism with the A prefix starts off with just absence or without, as per linguistic structure and etymology and things like that, just the way the language works. So that's generally how I'm trying to go forward with this. So I guess one of the things is with Christianity, from my understanding, is there are both logical and illogical aspects to it. And that's what I'm hoping that Josh will be able to talk about and give us some perspective on, because he's the Christian and I'm the atheist, and I guess this is where we proceed to that point.
Hey, I'm sorry. That was really good, and I will agree to that terminology.
Thank you,
Josh. It is your turn to define Christianity.
How I would define Christianity, I would look at what C.S. Lewis has said in his book Mere Christianity. In preparation for this debate, I went ahead and read Mere Christianity again. And Christianity is all those denominations, or all the churches that hold to the essentials of the Christian faith. We're talking about original sin, that there is one God, that he has revealed himself in three persons, that Jesus bodily rose from the dead, and that he will return someday. I think this is the definition of what Christianity is. This is something that I've been trying to defend for the longest time, and I still try to defend it. I don't think that there's illogical parts or spheres or understandings of Christianity. I do believe there are mysteries of Christianity. For example, how can God be one person? One being revealed in three different persons: the Son, the Father, and the Holy Spirit. Now, that's not a logical contradiction, but it is a mystery how that is so. But as for the definition of atheism, historically, it has been understood that atheism is the belief that God does not exist. And this is something Cal Neeson, a professional philosopher, has even said. But be that as it may, I don't want this debate to, go over and over and argue about what atheism actually is. I'd much rather get into the substance of our disagreements and not so much the definitions.
That's right, but it is always good in a debate to actually, define what we mean by these words, because atheism and Christianity both are, concepts. They're huge concepts. There's multiple ideas attached to them. There's different ideologies, different ways of looking at both of these. I can't say they're both structures, but they're both ideas. A vast umbrella of ideas that I think it is important for us to know. What each other actually means when we say these things.
I do believe that there is a difference between atheism and agnosticism. I think agnosticism is the belief that one does not know, or that God or knowledge of God cannot be known. In that way, I think a lot of people, when they say atheism is merely the lack of belief, they're really advocating agnosticism. And the founder of American Atheists, for example, let me just finish. The founder of American Atheists was Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and she said an agnostic is just an atheist without guts. And I do hope that for this debate to really get into the substance, I don't want to quibble about these definitions. I really want to go to the implications, because both of these worldviews, and I do think they have implications for how a person lives. I think they're important things that these two worldviews have.
Okay, Randolph, do you have any rebuttals to that?
Well, thank you, Josh. I know the agnosticism term comes up a lot, and from one founder to the next of an atheist organization, I would say that I would have to guess what she meant, because in order to conceptualize a belief in order to believe in something, someone must first have at least a partial concept of what that thing is before they can believe in it. Otherwise, it's just not possible to believe in something if you have no concept of what it is, even its name. So with agnosticism, definitely the focus is on knowledge. And my understanding of agnosticism is quite consistent, I think, with Josh's, that it's the idea that one must, it's not possible to determine if a deity exists or not at this point, at least with our current tools. Because, for example, we're not able to explore every corner of the universe simultaneously to rule it out as something that might be there. So I'm certainly willing to grant that, that as a, say it's not impossible. I may not go so far as to say it's possible, because the skeptic in me wants some evidence on this. In order to believe in something, one must have this knowledge. But if one
you're talking about burden of proof.
Yeah, I guess we get into that. We need to get into some standard of evidence and things like that as well, if we're going to go that route.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, I do think we both share the burden of proof in this debate. Would you concur with that?
What do you think my claim is?
If you're going to claim that atheism is more plausibly true than Christianity or Christian theism, you shoulder the burden of proof. I wanted to read this in my first statement. This is from Kel Neeson, a professional atheistic philosopher. To show that an argument is invalid or unsound is not to show that the conclusion of the argument is false. All the proofs of God's existence may fail, but it still may be the case that God exists. In short, to show that the proofs do not work is not enough by itself. It may still be the case that God exists, and that's Cal Neeson in his book Reason and Practice. So I think professional atheistic philosophers, that they understand this in a more philosophically substantive way.
So I did say that I can't rule it out completely, as I did talk about agnosticism. And I do think that certainly does factor in. There's, because if I was to claim that a deity does not exist, then yes, I would certainly have that burden. So myself personally, I don't make that claim, because I don't feel that I could back that up with any integrity. But by the same token, I also don't claim that a deity does exist. I don't hold a belief in it. So that doesn't mean that I'm believing against it or for it. It just means that I don't hold a belief on the matter.
But if the theist starts giving arguments, and I have I believe it's 8 arguments here. If they start giving arguments, you would concur that they have to raise a defeater or an undercutting or rebutting defeater. Would you concur with that?
The person who's making the argument is certainly open to scrutiny and challenge, and because every claim does automatically come with it some kind of burden to justify it, to validate it in some way. I think that's just quite common.
All right. Well, maybe we can get into the substance of this debate, but I did want to talk to you a second about how these debate how they're good and how
Sure.
They show that we can that we have a lot more in common than we think.
Well, first of all, we're humans. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
I'd say we have a vested interest in this world being better for everybody in various ways.
Yes, absolutely. I believe these discourses, these debates, can really bring us together. I do think that we're all created in the image of God, and I think that even though arguments and debates sometimes can get rowdy, I think at the end of the day we need to stand up for censorship because if we don't stand up, people are going to try to take those things away from us. So I think both the Christian, of course, and the atheist have legitimate things to say, and I think if we respect each other, we can work together and make this world a better place. The problem I have is not with.
Can I just interject for a sec? I'd like to clarify. You said stand up for censorship. Did you mean stand up against censorship or for censorship?
Against censors.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah. Oh, good. Then we're on the same team on that one.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I do agree with you. I think everybody has legitimate things to say usually. Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me on that. I think that I am not, and I think I speak for Red Pill religion in some way. We're not against atheism or atheists. We're against those dogmatic atheists that try to act like bullies sometimes. Just talking to you, I know you're not like that.
Well, just to clarify, because I do speak for Red Pill religion, it is specifically the organized atheists, the ones that are trying to sow division. Because I personally don't trust any organization that is solely for the sowing of division, of highlighting all of our weaknesses. This is for both Christianity and for atheism. I find I am personally detested by that type of action between both sides. So and I most of us are. We're a project that originally came as a response to the more, I would call them more extreme, the ones that actually mock people on the internet and stuff like that. Without actually, that's all I have to say.
Okay,
and let me just finish.
Sorry, Josh. When it comes to the mockery, there is the freedom of expression aspect. It definitely isn't comfortable, but as somebody who's against censorship and somebody who favors freedom of expression, what goes with that is that we need to make sure that people who have horrible things to say also have the opportunity to say them. I would much rather know who those people are and let them air their concerns publicly, because it can be therapeutic for many of them. The alternative of censoring them is it just runs them underground, and then later on in the future at some point, they sometimes have brought a number of people together who have the same grievances, and then they come out in large numbers and sometimes very violently because it has gone unchecked. I'd rather people have it in the open forum,
Well, absolutely. I'm sorry that I'm not fully. I wasn't fully made my opinion on that clear. I'm not talking about censorship. I'm more talking about as people, right? If you're going to treat people how they treat you because they treat you as they wish to be treated, that is an axiom that I live by.
I disagree with it, by the way. We can get to that later.
But if my thing on that is, instead of silencing people, we're all within our right to counter those ideas with the same type of action, like the mockery and stuff like that. Even though I don't like it, I do agree. I do think it is. It was at one time a valid tactic, but at this point, I'm seeing more and more radicalization on social media. That type of thing is not helping. I think it is making things a lot worse. So I just wanted to make myself clear on that part.
I think that's a fair criticism.
But I do think that both sides should be allowed to mock each other. It's we would also have to not ignore the negatives that come with that.
One thing on the internet, and this is especially true of Twitter, I'm sure it's true of other platforms as well. I know a lot of atheists who've tried to actually censor some Christians and actually tried to call their employment. I think that's a really horrible thing. And if a Christian were to do that to an atheist, I would stand up against the Christian because, as you said, censorship and free speech is a virtue. Censorship, we should not be doing that. It's kind of like what YouTube did to Alex Jones. Even though they're a private institution, what they're doing to Alex Jones, as Jordan Peterson said, that's the best way to make someone paranoid, to give them already reasons for their paranoia. I think we should have respectful debate, but when there are bullies who try to come after you with videos or something, I think it's okay to stand up to them and challenge them to debates. It's all too familiar for me that atheists, sometimes they love to make videos, but when you ask them to debate and to defend those videos, that they're not there, they run. So I just want us to work together, and you can say what you want, but let's don't censorship in any way.
Okay, I think we're in agreement on this. If you have anything to say to that, Randolph, please do. Yeah. But I would like to urge us to go back into the topic of, is Christianity more logical than atheism?
Okay. I would like to add a point. There's what Josh touched on there with people calling somebody's workplace that's harassment, and it doesn't matter to me what the person's affiliation or association with something is. It's not appropriate. You're calling somebody at a professional environment and causing problems for them just because of their views. That's not quite raising it to a point of escalating to violent acts, but it is escalating it somewhat in that direction, because it has the potential to impact somebody's livelihood and impact their life in a very negative way. If they were to lose their job, for example, over it and not get another job right away, they could end up missing mortgage payments and things. So it's very serious. And I agree with you, Josh. That shouldn't happen.
Well, I would like it. Would it be okay for me to start with maybe a 5-minute opening?
Yes, please do.
Okay. Man, writes Lorne Isley, is the cosmic orphan. He is the only creature in the universe who asks why. Other animals have instincts to guide them, but man has learned to ask questions. Who am I? Man asks. Why am I here? Where am I going? Now, according to Aristotle, philosophy begins with a sense of wonder about the world. And the most profound question a man can ask concerns the very origin of the universe. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Randolph, but on April 8th, 1966, Time magazine published an issue with the question on its cover, is God dead? But just as Time had raised the question of God's existence in light of the supposed death of God, in which pronounced God altogether dead the next year, a remarkable change took place. Merely a few years later, Time ran the cover, is God coming back to life? During the last quarter century, Randolph, a remarkable revolution has occurred in American philosophy. This change was so noteworthy that even the popular media observed it. In an article entitled Moderating the Case for God, published on April 7th in 1980, Time magazine commented, in a quiet revolution in thought and argument that hardly anybody could have foreseen only 2 decades ago, God is making a comeback. Most intriguingly, this is happening not among theologians or ordinary believers, but in the crisp intellectual circles of academic philosophy, where the consensus has long banished the Almighty from fruitful discourse. Now, God is not dead in academia. He returned to life in the late 1960s and is now alive and well in his last academic stronghold, philosophy departments. That was a quote I just read from Quentin Smith in one of his articles on naturalism. I want to talk to you also about Aristotle. Aristotle, of course, wrote a book called The Metaphysics. And the Metaphysics starts with the statement, a man, I'm going to skip that actually. And I'm just going to tell you for time restraints. I'm going to defend a number of arguments. I don't know if you're well aware of this, but about concerning the beginning of the universe, I'm going to defend the Kalam cosmological argument, the contingency argument, which says, why is there anything at all rather than just nothing? It says that for anything to exist, it needs to have an explanation for its existence in either its own nature or an external cause. And since the universe has an explanation of its existence, then that explanation must be God. It can't exist necessarily. I'm also going to defend intentionality, how intentional states of consciousness show that there must be a substance here to guide us. I'm not sure if you're aware of a philosopher named William James, but William James wrote a book in 1870 called The Principles of Psychology. And he argued that the mind controls all the neurons and so forth that are going on in the brain. So the brain would act at a hair trigger to any stimuli that's coming into it by the five senses. But the mind, us, we control that. We keep it from getting out of hand. That's a strong argument for substance dualism. I also think the fine-tuning of the universe shows or implies that God exists.
All right, Josh,
yeah.
1 minute left.
Okay, the moral argument. Basically, it says if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Premise 2, objective moral values do exist. And 3, therefore, God exists. I believe that there's an argument from miracles also. And lastly, I believe there's an argument from religious experience, how that we can know God intuitively as a properly basic belief. I think a lot of the skepticism, and I think a lot of your arguments, to be frank, are going to come from a man named David Hume. And I think that's been thoroughly refuted, and I hope to get into that as the debate continues. Thank you.
Sorry, I had my microphone off. Okay, so you've mentioned the Kalam cosmological argument, among some other things like the fine-tuning of the universe and objective moral values, which are quite interesting. That the history about Time magazine publishing things is certainly interesting, but I don't really see how that's really all that relevant to what we're talking about. I'm quite interested in what you're saying though about the Kalam, those other three items. So I don't agree with the Kalam cosmological argument, because I think the first part of it, that whatever exists must have a cause. I don't know how we can be completely certain about that. It's from what we can see, it does seem to be the case, but I would have to say I'm not entirely convinced that that is correct, because we are left with this mystery of where did the universe come from? Where did the cosmos come from? And if it was created by some intelligent being, where did that intelligent being come from? When we get into the situation of infinite regress, what created its creator, and so on. And so that is a problem that I think the Kalam cosmological argument does not address. And because it doesn't address that, I ignore the other parts of its premise there, because that first one needs to be dealt with. As far as the fine-tuning is concerned, What I see, what I know of even our local solar system and our galaxy, it is overwhelmingly inhospitable to life. So, some noise. Is everything okay? So the universe is overwhelmingly inhospitable to life. So we're on a planet that just happens to be in what is the Goldilocks zone for us and all the planets that live on it. We have evolution that has shown us how things have progressed over time and how we've come to be. And then before that, there is the scientific idea of abiogenesis, the spark of life, if you want to call it that. I think that's a nice name for it. So those are two different things that I notice a lot of people do seem to think of as just as evolution, and they're not. As far as objective morals are concerned, I would certainly like to see an example of objective morality. I think that you and I can agree on certain things subjectively, and then make objective determinations based on our subjective agreement. But that, to me, doesn't qualify ultimately as an objective moral value. Does that all make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. I'm not really debating, but Josh, do you have any rebuttals?
I wonder if he remembers his microphone's off.
I muted him manually.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay, let's go over the Kalam cosmological argument. Randolph, and for the first premise, you say we can't be certain of that. Let me repeat. The first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument is whatever that begins to exist has a cause. In our experience, we never see things popping into existence uncaused out of nothing. In fact, if that were true, that would be a science stopper. So it's at least plausibly true, more so than its negation. The rational man would believe in the first premise that it is plausibly true. You have quips about the infinite regress of the universe.
Actually, I was wondering, for the Kalam cosmological argument, if everything must have a cause, then
that's not the argument. It's only things that begin to exist have a cause.
Okay, whatever begins to exist. So, if your deity at some point would have had to begin to exist at some point, what caused that to happen?
Why couldn't God exist timelessly and changelessly, sans the universe, but in time subsequent to the universe? Why is that not a possibility? I mean, that would answer that infinite regress that you brought up.
Do you consider that to be more plausible than the universe just existing the way it is?
But all the evidence shows that the universe actually came into existence at the Big Bang.
Okay, so my understanding is that Stephen Hawking and Penrose together updated their theory of the Big Bang to indicate that there were multiple Big Bangs.
Yeah, that's the multiverse hypothesis.
Really quick, just for clarification, are you guys talking about the specific first cosmological argument?
Yeah, the Kalam cosmological
argument. Everything that has a beginning of existence has a cause of its existence.
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
In his book, The Nature of Space and Time, that's his new book after his first book, Stephen Hawking's, he says, now almost everyone believes that time and space had a beginning at the Big Bang. I believe that's on page 96. That's after he published A Brief History of Time. So that new book, he makes that argument. All of these scientists, at least some of them speculate on the multiverse, but the multiverse is meant to explain away the evidence and there's no direct observation evidence for it. It's a way to explain away the origin of the universe. By the way, I do have some replies to these other arguments that other rebuttals you brought up.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's go to the moral argument first.
Okay.
The moral argument basically says if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist. Objective moral values do exist, and 3, therefore God exists. Now, it seems that you attack premise 2. Okay, premise 2 is objective moral values do exist. Now, do you really are you really skeptical of that?
Okay, and to clarify, skepticism and pessimism are two different things, where skepticism tends to be more neutral. By nature, it's neutral. I'm questioning it because I'm not aware of any such thing as an objective moral value. That's why I'm asking for an example of
well, surely not. Value. Surely you, in your daily life, you live as if certain things are objectively good and that we ought to do certain things and ought not to do certain things. Wouldn't you concur with that in your everyday life?
Okay, so those are based on my own preferences, my own personal preferences, and ideal. The way that I see is an ideal way to live. That may not be the case for somebody else, though.
Well, let me ask you this:
that's where it's not objective. That's where it's subjective.
Okay, let me ask you this then: if I teach American history and world history.
Oh wow!
If the Nazis would have won in World War II, would it have been objectively okay, since everybody believed it for the killing of Jews?
From my own moral standard, no. For somebody who grew up being indoctrinated into that, they may very well see no problem with it.
But surely we have responsibility as people to condemn such actions and to praise. Well, if it's just a subjective feeling, why would you place it on other people that they have to live by it? Why would you make laws and that killing is wrong?
The reason we have these laws is because not everybody agrees with it, and so we need these laws to set a standard in society. There are different societies with different standards. Like Saudi Arabia, for example, has a different set of laws than we have here.
And they're bad, right?
Yeah, but for example, in Saudi Arabia, they believe that they have it in their law books that if you're an atheist, you are to be classified as a terrorist and executed for it.
Okay, well, that's something
we don't do that here for atheists. It's different, right?
That's something I could totally.
It's okay.
I would totally disagree with the Saudi government for doing that.
Me too.
But what about women? What about their they're treating women not equal, like not letting them drive and so forth? How can you make
slaves? They recently overturned that law, as I understand, but there's still all kinds of other atrocious things going on. Plus, I've also heard that it's very hard to get a driver's license if you're a woman in Saudi Arabia. So, it might as well. What's the point of overturning it?
Well, is that an improvement or a deviation from their just law system? Could you say?
I think it's public relations is what it is.
But could you say that is an improvement? Do you think people should be treated equally?
I think that equality in opportunity is very important. Equality of outcome is something that may not be achievable because people have different abilities and things like that. So it's not a black and white answer, unfortunately.
Well, I'm saying equally under the law. I mean that they have the opportunity. Well, then how can you make such a claim? How can you say that's a virtue See, I think Christians can make such a claim because we're created in the image of God with capacities to do certain things, and we shouldn't censor a person's capacities to reach their full potential. But how does an atheist make that claim that people should be treated with respect or be treated equally?
Can I make one small clarification first, as far as I would like to ask for clarification on Josh on I forgot what I was going to ask clarification on, so I guess I don't need to.
Okay. Well, what about my last question, Randolph? How could you condemn certain acts when women are treated correctly in certain societies, like the Islamic societies? And how can you praise people like I don't know, a Martin Luther King or an Abraham Lincoln?
Oh, that's what I was going to ask for clarification on, as far as the Muslim communities thing, because it's I want to make sure everybody realizes the politics of those regions we don't fully know. So, like, there are some things that are happening in Saudi Arabia we don't know about, good and bad. So it's I'd like everybody not to cast judgment on the Islamic societies.
Well, we were using Saudi Arabia as an example of a legal system that works very differently from ours here in Canada.
I understand that, but this is more for the audience, a disclaimer for the audience type of thing.
Okay.
Well, let's be clear. Let's be clear. The Saudi Arabia legal system is not as good as the Canadian or the American legal system. But
I agree with you on that. However, from the standpoint of objectivity, the people in charge of Saudi Arabia probably disagree with us. So,
why does agreement and disagreement play any factor here? Look, you said people disagree about moral laws. Well,
yes.
People disagree about whether vanilla or chocolate or strawberry is the best. But
that's right.
Well,
it's the nature of who we are, right?
Surely raping someone is different than eating vanilla ice cream. Wouldn't you concur with that?
Yeah, you're comparing violence, so it's a very different thing. As far as from the perspective of the victim, it's a terrible thing, assuming they're not a masochist. And there's
why is it a terrible thing? I mean, our laws are based on British common law, which is based on Catholic canon law and Justinian and the Romans and Cicero. It's based on natural law. When you get down to it, that certain things are right and wrong. I don't see how you can not condemn certain actions like rape. Sure, it's violence, but
what makes you think that I'm not condemning it?
Well, how can you condemn it?
I just told you from the perspective of the victim, it's a bad thing. It's horrible. So of course I condemn it.
Isn't that your subjective belief that it's horrible?
Yes, it is.
But
I'm trying to understand the perspective of the victim as best I can while that's going in respect to that, and make the best determination I can. Now, if somebody who's a victim of rape has a better perspective to share with me, and I may adjust my perspective accordingly. I think I'm on the right track, though, here.
Wouldn't it be a common sense appraisal of praise and blame, that certain actions should be praised and certain actions should be blamed as not something we should strive for or something we should teach our students or children?
I'm not quite following what you're asking, because I'm kind of focused on your other question of how did I come to this determination. of what's moral. Maybe you can clarify for me.
Well, I just don't see how you came to that clarification. It seems to me that you're borrowing from a Christian view, that you're so inundated from the surrounding culture that you take up these Christian presuppositions, but you feel that you have the liberty to be an atheist. But I don't see, if God does not exist, where does your reference point to condemn such actions as rape come from?
You are specifically Christian?
I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Are you implying that compassion and or empathy are specifically Christian ideals?
No, I think a person can be an atheist and have compassion and empathy, but I don't think the atheist has an objective standard, a standard that transcends, our mere cultural milieu, to which to make a basis of which to praise certain actions and condemn certain actions, such as rape or child abuse.
I agree that there's no objective standard to draw from. That's why, me, as an atheist, I do my best to make the proper determination on it. I try to be thoughtful and consider how victims or potential victims might feel. To make moral determinations, I guess, is kind of where we're going with this. I'm just anticipating here. I do so by trying to consider how other people will feel in that situation. John Rawls, in his theory of justice, that's R-A-W-L-S, he talked about, he suggested the veil of ignorance as a great tool for lawmakers who could, the idea is they make laws and they don't know what their role will be in society after that law is put into effect. And so they need to consider how it will impact all these different people in society. So in a sense, I try to use that line of thinking to make the best moral determination that I can about how to live my life and how the things I do and the decisions I make will impact other people.
Yeah, but you've grown up in a culture which says, based on our law system, that certain things are objectively good or objectively bad. That's what our law system is based on. That's why certain things are condemned.
Laws clarify social norms. I don't believe that the laws tell us that these are objective, though.
Why can't we learn about God through the evolutionary and the historical process?
Which evolutionary process? You're talking about the scientific evolution?
No, the social norms, how we come about. See, you're talking about epistemology, right? How we come about to learn about and how we form these beliefs. But I'm talking about, and so is the moral argument that I presented in my opening. I'm talking about ontology. I'm saying if God does not exist, objective moral values do not exist.
So can you demonstrate an objective moral value that does exist that depends on a God existing?
Well, I can say that without God, that if there is no God, why wouldn't all things be permitted? As Dostoevsky said, well, that's exactly what Dostoevsky said. If there is no God, all things are permitted. That's what he said in Crime and Punishment. I don't see why that would be false. Nietzsche said the same thing, actually.
So that seems to imply that because there's no God, all things are permitted. You're saying there is a God, so what is it that's not permitted that we're capable of doing?
We're not talking about epistemology, we're talking about ontology. There is no reference point if God does not exist. There is no reference point to condemn certain actions. Let me read again Kel Neeson again. He says, "We have not been able to show that reason requires the moral point of view, or that all really rational persons, unhoodwinked by myth or ideology, need not be individual egoists or classical amoralists. Reason doesn't decide here. The picture I painted you is not a good one. That is Kel Neeson, an atheistic philosopher who I mentioned in my opening. Mere atheism does not give a basis for morality. Christianity seems more plausible as far as objective moral values. And yes.
Atheism doesn't provide a set of moral values. That's correct. Christianity is a specific set of rules of what people who created it or wrote it down originally. I guess they agreed with it. That was their view, and there are many people who adhere to the values of Christianity. I notice that it differs depending on which denomination people are in. And so the consistency doesn't seem to be there, which also raises for me a question about the reliability of it being objective, because there's so many different Christians that have different interpretations of it.
Well, Randolph, in my opening statement, I said that when I was defining what Christianity is, I talked about C.S. Lewis and mere Christianity and how it's held together by these essential Christian doctrines. So, denominations or churches, they all agree that certain things are objectively wrong. But even if they didn't agree, just as I gave the example of as if Hitler would have won World War II, it still would have been wrong to kill Jews and gypsies and the disabled. See, the objective moral standards and duties doesn't depend on agreement. That's talking about epistemology, not ontology.
So, yeah, if it doesn't require agreement, then I'm still wanting to have an example of an objective moral value. I haven't heard one yet.
How about raping a child for fun? Do you think you could condemn that?
Oh, definitely. I think that's wrong.
But why?
Atrocious.
Why do you think that's wrong?
Because I'm considering from the perspective of the child.
How about consider from the perspective of common sense and what it would do to society if that was permitted?
Okay, so let's take another look at Saudi Arabia then, where they have clerics who have publicly stated that a girl can be married to a guy when she's 1 year old. So there's a different standard there. They think it's okay.
Do you think that example
I know they
in Saudi Arabia? Do you think that example in Saudi Arabia is bad, and why? It seems that Christianity can condemn it, atheism can't condemn it.
Of course atheism can't condemn it. This is a personal value on my part.
It's a mere subjective value.
Yes, it is. I agree.
It's on the standard of ice cream flavors, correct?
It is.
I don't think you live that. I don't think you live that way. And to be frank with you, Randolph, and I don't think anyone lives that way. Maybe the sociopath lives that way, but a person with common sense knows that there's a difference.
I don't think sociopaths. I don't know of any sociopaths who condemn rape, but I also don't know very many sociopaths. But I definitely condemn rape.
Yes, but on what basis? I know you condemn it, but my challenge is that you're borrowing from the Christian reference point to make that ontological affirmation and condemning it.
I don't believe I am. I'm looking at how would it feel if I was a child and I was a victim of that.
Well, what's wrong?
Like
why is it wrong to take away a child's feelings? Why is that something that other people should agree with you about?
Sorry, how is this taking away a child's feelings?
No, I mean, if they're raped or something.
Okay. I think we're getting into a example that is a little bit too graphic for YouTube standards.
Sure.
And with everything that's going on with the what YouTube is doing with the child thing, I would like to propose this question to both of you so we can move on.
Okay.
Can somebody say that something is wrong objectively? It doesn't matter how they're. Let's say that anything that is offensive violence, a majority of humans would objectively say that is wrong. That is the immediate thing most say. Within science, we see with PTSD, even soldiers who kill people who are shooting at them still feels a remorse, still receives harm from doing that action, even though they are saving lives, essentially. And there's still this moral argument they have to tackle. So with that, I would say that would be an example of like an objective set of morals. And you guys can disagree or agree on that analogy, but I think that goes with my denomination's perspectives on it. I'm not sure about either of you two, but I would like to move the discussion on.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. I don't think that it's possible to get full agreement from every person in the world on any moral value, because it seems to be that there's so many people in the world with different views that it's always possible to find somebody with a different view. There are all kinds of horrible things that people do. So there's always, that's why we have people in prison for committing certain crimes, such as murder and whatnot. They think that that's okay, some of those people, and they've been in interviews talking about just that. So as long as you can find at least one person out there who has a different viewpoint on it, then you don't have something that I think would qualify as something that every person, every human just agrees on.
I think that's a really bad argument. I mean,
okay.
I think if people have disagreements, I think that's fine. People had disagreements on what a person was before, or whether slavery should be tolerated in the States, or should it be officially banned. But this disagreement, and when we have civil discourse, there's an implied notion that we can improve society by trying to find or discover the truth. That seems to me to point to something that can be derived, that we ought and ought not do, that we need to try to improve society.
So that's where we get into the social standards, and what even we see changes even in rural communities versus the big cities that are almost right next to each other, or right across the water from each other. We can see North Korea versus China. There's big differences in how people live out their lives.
Yeah, and to condemn China, to condemn communism, or to condemn censorship, it seems to me that you would have to say it's not just a subjective feeling like ice cream flavors, but it's something we can improve on that type of thing, just as we can improve on slavery or things from our past.
Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement.
Well, then aren't you presuming some standard of goodness, badness, and goodness that you're presuming some scale where you can increase the well-being of society?
I don't know if everybody's capable of that. I like to believe that the vast majority of people are.
Well,
but again,
is that a
that's
faith
a subjective
statement?
opinion?
But is that a faith statement on your part?
It's a preference. I would like to believe that. So it's just I guess I'd call it optimism. So, but I don't know for sure that that's the case because I really don't know what everybody's capabilities are.
But before we move on, and I want to get to my other arguments, but
Sure.
is this escalating scale where you think you would like to believe that people can improve, and you would you do condemn Saudi Arabia and how they treat women. It seems that you act very much like a Christian, but because of your atheistic philosophical commitments, you have to play the subjective relativistic game. But in real life, you don't act that way. You act more like a Christian. Do you concur?
I don't know what it means to be acting like a Christian, so I can't agree or disagree with that.
You condemn Saudi Arabia, and you think that society can be improved upon, correct?
Sure, but I don't get that from Christianity.
Oh, okay. Name it whatever you want, but you don't. You get that from some standard that transcends our mere cultural milieu.
Because I've thought about what's going on there, and I think that if I was a woman in Saudi Arabia society, that I would not like it. I would find it very restrictive.
Isn't that your subjective opinion?
Yes, it is.
Well, see, you're acting like there is an objective standard to which to condemn the Saudi government, how they condemn women, and you're acting.
I'm not saying there's an objective standard there.
No, but you're acting like it, Randolph.
I'm not acting like it. That doesn't make sense. I've made it clear already.
When I'm trying to,
I do have to agree with him that he's not. He's acting. He has acted throughout the entire thing of from morality on the basis of subjective morality, as I understand it. Am I correct on that, Randolph?
Oh yeah, I've said it's subjective all the way. I did say originally one point that might have added some confusion when I said if we can all agree on a certain subjective standard, like murder is wrong, then we can make objective determinations on other people's actions. But that's ultimately that's still subjective. Yes.
Okay, but in the sense of having time, we do have about 45 minutes left.
Let's go. I got some other arguments.
Okay.
Okay. Now, we were talking about the cosmological argument. In the first premise, I do think it's more plausible than its negation. And also, if you believe that it was false that whatever begins to exist has the cause, then you would literally think that things could pop into existence right now in your chair, in your living room, and start defecating on your books, Randolph. And I don't think you believe that.
Sorry, doing what?
I think if you really doubted the first premise of the Kalam cosmological argument, that what if the things that begin to exist have a cause, then you would believe that things could pop into existence uncaused out of nothing. So why couldn't something pop into existence in your living room and start defecating on your books, for example?
Oh, that's disgusting, man. You don't really need to go there. Anyway, I'll. The thing is, it is possible. I think. Well, I wouldn't say possible. The universe might have come from absolutely nothing, and the idea of what are the characteristics of absolutely nothing? And the answer to that is, I don't know. I don't think anybody actually knows the answer to that question, because as far as I'm aware, nobody's actually had.
It's the lack of something, Randolph. It's
Sure.
not something that has a positive property. Homer, in
Okay,
fact,
now
in his
hang on. Now you're defining it as something. So it's not absolutely nothing anymore. It's not the lack
we
of
can
it.
talk philosophically about it. I'm not acting like Lawrence Krauss that would say nothing is like a pronoun or has some kind of properties. Homer, in his Iliad, discussed this, that we can have we can play word games if we use nothing as in the place of a proper noun. That's what Lawrence Krauss does.
Yeah, I'm not trying to play a word game here. I'm trying to explain a concept. Whereas if we don't actually know what the characteristics are of that lack of everything, as you called it, the absolutely nothing, then how can we, with full certainty, discount the possibility of it, of things erupting from it? You know, we don't actually have the capability to rule that out. So if there's nothing before the universe,
I don't see. Yeah, the current physics shows that that time and space and everything included in it had a beginning at the Big Bang. So I don't see how that's how that's plausible. In fact, I don't think you said anything about premise 2. The universe began to exist. What is your defeater for premise 2 of the Coulomb cosmological argument?
I told you I'm not convinced by the first premise. Already, I've rejected it. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. What's its cause?
Okay, let's go back to the first premise. If you deny that, then you would say certain things can pop into existence without a cause. I apologize for being graphic, but it was meant to illustrate how, if you deny premise 1 of the Coulomb cosmological argument, you should be scared about a giant kangaroo coming into existence out of nothing in your living room.
Let's try not to be too graphic, but on that one.
Yeah, we'll keep it clean.
I'll use a dog then.
Oh no, it's
yeah.
Can we move it forward, please?
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to
move on.
I don't think you need to apologize for that. You have standards, and I agree with those standards.
I do think the Coulomb cosmological argument is more plausible. All of its premises are more plausible than its negation. I don't think you said anything against that. You did raise concerns that you don't know if it's for certain thing that premise 1 is certain, but I think it's plausible. That's how I think we should treat these premises.
For me, I want to know more about whatever begins to exist has a cause, and I'm not convinced that that's actually the case, and I just explained to you why that is the case. So what did the universe come from? Did it erupt from absolutely nothing, or did something else trigger it? And as far as I know, we don't have an actual answer to that question that we can validate yet or verify. So it's an unknown.
Well, certainly you're not saying that it came from absolutely nothing, Randolph.
I'm not making that specific claim. I'm just wondering if that's one possibility. I'm looking at I'm interested in multiple possibilities to ponder.
I don't know if you're familiar with who Alexander Vilenkin is. I want to read one quote, and I'm trying not to, quote too many times in this debate. He says,
I'm okay with
quote,
that.
he says in quote, "It is said that an argument is what convinces a reasonable man, and a proof is what it takes to convince even an unreasonable man. With the proof now in place, cosmologists can no longer hide behind the possibility of a past eternal universe. There is no escape. They have to face the problem of a cosmic beginning. And he said that in many worlds in one. And by the way, let me just finish. I personally emailed Alexander Vilenkin, and I wanted to know about this controversy and if Dr. Craig had represented his views, and he said he did represent his views correctly in these quotes.
Okay.
So you're going against science, it seems.
I'm going against somebody who's written about it. I don't know if I'm going against him. I'm just wondering about of different possibilities.
Well, I mean, we can name different possibilities all day long, Randolph.
Sure.
I mean, I could say that it's possible that the moon is made out of cheese, Randolph, but it's not probable.
Well, we know that it's not because we've been to the moon. I know some people think the moon landings are fake, but and including the recent one from China, but I tend to believe those as true. They make sense to me.
And I don't think it's just one scientist. I literally have dozens of quotes. Here's one more, and this is the last one I'll share on this subject. This is from PCW Davies. And he says, what caused the Big Bang? One might consider some supernatural force, some agency beyond space and time as being responsible for the Big Bang. Or one might prefer to regard the Big Bang as an event without a cause. It seems to me that we don't have too much of a choice. Either something outside the physical world or an event without a cause.
Okay, so he's looking at multiple possibilities, as am I.
Well, he narrowed it down to two, that either an event without a cause or something outside the physical universe. Now, the only thing that
what I just said a few minutes ago, yes.
Well, what if there's nothing outside the physical universe, according to naturalism? Then why did the universe begin to exist 14 billion years ago, Randolph?
That's a great question that I don't have the answer for. I would love to know, but I really don't have the answer to it.
Christianity has a ready explanation for that,
which doesn't convince me.
Well, maybe you don't want to look at the evidence. I mean,
what evidence?
Okay, well, for the beginning of the universe, how it's plausible.
Yeah, so you're saying it's plausible. I don't find it convincing. Like I said, I'm open to different possibilities. It's just that one doesn't seem convincing to me.
Okay, we'll move on to
when it's coupled up with the fine-tuning argument that rather takes away seems to take away its plausibility.
Well, yeah, I would like to discuss the fine-tuning argument now with you.
Sure. Okay.
Here's the best formulation of the fine-tuning argument that I know of. This is what Craig and others have used, but you can formulate it in
Dr. William Lane Craig, right?
Yeah, and you can formulate it in a number of different ways, but I like to use this one that he does. Here's premise one. If God does not exist, the fine-tuning of the universe is either due to law, chance, or design. The fine-tuning of the universe is not due to law or chance, therefore it is due to design. It's a very plausible argument. I can give you a number of initial conditions for the beginning of the universe.
Has he ruled out the combination of law and chance together?
Well,
working in tandem?
Law would be something like the universe would have to have these parameters as far as initial conditions of the universe. But there's no reason why there's no reason why these parameters had to be like they are. That's the point of arguing against the law, the lawfulness of the universe, that it's the product of a natural law. Now, if you're going to argue chance, Randolph, you're going to go against an infinitesimal. You're going to go for an infinitesimal number to say that it's plausible, and all the evidence that we have argues against that.
You seem to have an expectation that I find it rather implausible, the expectation that this whole universe is created for us, when the vast majority of it is inhospitable to life.
I think that's a straw man. I don't think
really?
It's necessarily meant for us. I think it's meant for the eventual emergence of any kind of life. Now, I'm not going to try to argue it was meant for us, because you could argue that it's hospitable towards life, but the argument is not for that. It's for the eventual emergence of any kind of life, the very possibility of life.
So you seem to be presuming that there is a purpose to the universe. There's a purpose to life.
Yeah, I in this argument, I wasn't arguing for that. I do think that there's something special about life rather than non-life, and I think anyone that views common sense would accept that definition. I don't know if you're familiar. Let me ask you: are you familiar with the 18th and 19th century in Europe? It's a philosophy known as common sense realism.
No, I've not heard of that one.
These were from were from Scotland, and these were Presbyterians. That's more like Calvinist churches today, if I understand that right.
Just to be clear, Presbyterians are their own doctrinal, not doctrinal. They're their own denominational body. They're one of the charismatic Protestant denominational bodies. They're still around.
Well, they're very akin to they're akin to, and they have a lot of similarities with Calvinism. But what I'm trying to argue.
Yeah, I'm not really. This is more for the audience, but with that whole thing that has to do with politics of the 18th century, which is a different topic.
In the 18th century, when I was talking about the skepticism that you have and that other skeptics and atheists have, I was referring to someone named David Hume. Now, the chief proponent of the common sense realism school was by a man named Thomas Reid. I basically can sum up Thomas Reid if you think about something called common sense notions. This is what he said about David Hume. This is a quote. "We see then that Mr. Hume's philosophy is very much like a hobby horse, which a man who when he is ill can keep at home with him and ride to his contentment. But just in case he should bring it to the marketplace of ideas, his friends would quickly impanel a jury and confiscate his estates and have the solicitude never to leave him alone." That was in his Inquiry into the Human Mind. You see, it's common sense where I think all of your arguments are not plausible, Randolph.
Okay, well, I think at those times there was a lot more injustice in the world too, and perspectives may have been a bit different on how these things rolled out, how these things played out.
Did you say injustice?
Yeah, there's some quote about people being sentenced or something in court, if I heard you correctly.
Well, where do you get
or their property being taken away, or that sort of thing, right? Or put in jail.
Yeah, where do you get the notion of justice and injustice from?
So this is starting to fit back into moral determination. Again, I refer back to John Rawls and his theory of justice as a great example of a way to think about justice and a way of performing laws with the veil of ignorance and whatnot. I try to use compassion and empathy to understand what is right and wrong, and for a justice system to be what I think is a good justice system is one that takes those kinds of things into consideration in the formation of the laws, so that we end up with something that is fair for as many people as possible, preferably everybody.
Yeah. Would John Rawls redistribute things?
Okay, we are kind of we were talking about the fine tuning argument, yeah. I believe. Randolph, do you have any rebuttals towards the fine tuning argument?
Well, I'm still stuck on the point where what seems to be implied by the fine tuning argument is that things are specifically set in place for us, people and everybody living on the earth, I suppose, and yet the vast majority of the universe is inhospitable to life, and in fact there are places on earth that are inhospitable to life.
Okay, so basically what your argument is, okay, so what your argument is, so because the universe is not perfect, you can't detect any design in it for the eventual emergence of life.
Oh, I didn't make an assessment on whether or not the universe is perfect. I'm just saying that, you know, if the fine-tuning argument seems to imply that the universe and planet Earth, they're all here for us, it's specifically set up for us. Otherwise, if anything was different, then we wouldn't be here, which I think is true. It's as if there's some way to change the way those characteristics of the universe work. I find it hard to believe.
Let me give you an argument. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the physicist John Wesley.
I've heard the name.
I'm sorry, John Leslie, not John Wesley. John Leslie. He wrote a book called Universes, and he pictured, I believe it was 100 sharpshooters aimed at one person that they're about to pull the trigger. Okay, now the chances of those sharpshooters all missing their mark and not hitting the person, a common sense interpretation of the facts would say that someone put blanks in their guns, right? I mean, it seems like there was a design for why that they missed. I don't understand why you don't see a design for why there is for the eventual emergence of life. Now, there's all types of parameters. I haven't gone over them because it would take too much time during this debate, but I'm literally looking at 5 of them right now, and there's, I believe, 60. There's over 60 for just the initial constants and quantities. So how do you come to grips with this in your atheistic worldview?
Well, first of all, I don't have an atheistic worldview. Atheism is not a worldview. But as far as that goes, we have scientific theory of evolution that explains how life evolved on Earth, all over the place, all various different forms of life, and I'm just not convinced that there's a design involved, a designer involved in it. It just seems to be that the processes are well accepted, and there's all kinds of biology and even vaccines that are based on this theory of evolution, and they work. So there seem to be plenty of examples that show that it works, and there's plenty of history that the Earth that shows that it has worked.
You're talking about evolution, but for even evolution to get off the ground, a lot of these parameters in the initial conditions have to be finely tuned. For example, the electromagnetic force. If it were slightly stronger or weaker, life would be impossible. This was John Leslie.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Well, he's wrote it. There's scientists that have wrote about this. Are you familiar with something called the anthropic principle, Randolph?
The anthropic principle. Why does that sound familiar? Let me just quickly look it up here.
The anthropic principle is something that physicists have shown that there needs to be an amazing number of these constants and quantities. Now, there is a book. I wish I had my PowerPoint slide up, but the anthropic principle was written by John Barrow, and I forgot the other person's name, but it goes over a lot of these. Let me list some more for you.
Are you saying that the anthropic principle is relevant to the fine tuning argument?
Yes.
Okay, so in that case, the implication I understood correctly, since the anthropic principle is defined here as the cosmological principle that theories of the universe are constrained by the necessity to allow human existence. That seems arrogant to me.
Yeah, that's a colloquial definition that someone wrote up.
Well, I would like to, because this is my job here. According to Wikipedia, which is not really a source, I can find another one, but the anthropic principle, anthropic principle is a philosophical consideration that observations of the universe must be compatible with the conscious and sapient life that observes it. That's the basic rundown, and there's more to it than that, of course.
And that's what Randolph's argument was. We shouldn't be surprised by the appearance of these cosmic coincidences, because if we weren't here, we wouldn't be here to observe it. I think that's weak, and for that, Randolph, I gave an argument for John Leslie, who is a prolific physicist in this whole debate about the firing squad analogy. Now, there are so many other constants and quantities I could give, but a common sense interpretation would if they saw a watch. Let's go back to William Paley's 1794 book. If anybody found a watch in a field, you would automatically wonder where what produced that watch, or how did it get there. It smacks of our common sense, intuitions to draw theological conclusions when we see the design in the universe.
Well, I think it's pretty easy to say that we know the watch is designed because it's well documented how to build them, and that they were constructed. And
constructed by minds, right?
Yeah, by people, yeah.
Well, they're instructed by intelligent minds.
Sure, I definitely agree with that. It definitely takes intelligence to design something like that.
Now, I do want to go to another argument, intentionality. Let me read this. If God, here's premise one. If God did not exist, intentional states of consciousness, like beliefs and values and so forth, would not exist. Intentional states of consciousness do exist, therefore God exists. Now, which of those two premises do you deny?
Well, if there's the problem that I have with it is, like you're saying, if God did not exist, consciousness would not exist, is basically the gist of everything you just said, right?
I'm saying in a naturalistic universe, it's hard to see how consciousness would have came about.
That's a human limitation.
Well, I don't see how that's relevant. It seems like it's not plausible that it came about naturalistically.
So if you're saying it's consciousness, then how come you're starting to get into the soul and things like that?
Well, I think it implies that, but I don't think the Christian theist has to go that far. I think the Christian theist can argue from functionality that the experience of observation shows that we have states of consciousness, that we can will things in the physical world. That would argue against a physicalistic model of the world, and it would argue for intentional states.
So what is consciousness becomes a question here that is relevant. So
Well,
what is it?
I'm glad you asked me that, Randolph. Are you familiar with someone named G.E. Moore?
I think he was going to continue onto a point as far as what is consciousness. Am I wrong, Randolph?
Oh no, I'm just wondering. Like this is where we're at.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have a point after that before he continued.
Yeah, it's this seems to be something that's
Okay.
comes up quite a bit is consciousness and the Christian God being credited for it, with the soul and all this being linked to it, and we wouldn't have consciousness if we didn't have a soul. But you were just saying Christianity doesn't have to go that far.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's consciousness is hard to define, and there's been very, very little understanding, progress in understanding really what consciousness is. But nonetheless, it's a living reality in our everyday lives, and I think we can argue for that we have consciousness, that we have states of consciousness where we can freely do things in the world. The world is not just run by physical and necessary states of affairs, but we can have agent causation in the world. And that very fact argues against naturalism or atheism. They're very closely linked. It doesn't disprove atheism, but it shows very strongly that those things aren't compatible. Atheism and naturalism.
I think as far as the scientific aspect goes, the scientific claims goes, that's definitely in the arena of science and naturalism there. The aspect about a deity, I would say that would argue with anti-theism rather than with atheism. I think I get your point there. The thing is, if consciousness, do you think consciousness is separate from the brain, like from the soul kind of perspective? I think that's it.
I don't think the Christian theist has to go that far.
Okay.
We don't. Maybe. For example, the theologian that teaches at Harvard, not Harvard, Notre Dame. His name is Peter Van Inwagen. He believes we're purely physical creatures, but this is me now. But we still have internal immaterial states of consciousness that argue against this physicalistic reality. Let me give you an example. I was asking earlier, are you familiar with the philosopher G.E. Moore?
I'm not.
G.E. Moore, in 1925, in his essay, A Defense of Common Sense, that's the title, he argued for idealism and against skepticism. He argued against those two things toward the external world on the grounds that that we could give reasons for them for metaphysical premises. Now, this is what his argument. this is what his argument was from common sense. He famously put the point into dramatic relief with his 1939 essay, Proof of an External World, in which he gave a common sense argument against skepticism by raising his right hand and saying, "Here is one hand," and then raising his left hand and saying, "And here is another," then concluding that there are at least two external objects in the world, and therefore that he knows by the argument that the external world exists. We can know things by states of a gentle causality, by raising our hands, by willing effects in the physical world.
So I think this is something that we agree on, is that we think that we are operating within a real world, operating within the same reality, and that there are consistent things about, characteristics about the reality, and that's fine. I have no problem with that. It's the best that we can do. We could all be brains in bats for all we know, but this illusion is being presented consistently enough to us that it all makes sense. So,
yeah. I have another argument. I didn't list it at the first, but I want to run it by you. The practical success of the school common sense realism that I've been mentioning to you. Now, you're not an American. I'm sorry, you're not a United States citizen, correct?
That's right. I'm Canadian.
Okay. Well, let me give you a history lesson. I'm a history teacher.
And, you've been keeping the White House painted white. You guys have been doing a great job. I just want to thank you for that.
Thank you. Some of our past presidents, I don't think everything in there should be.
You know what I'm
painted
referring
white.
to there. I'm just being a bit facetious.
Yeah. Common sense realism was from that Presbyterian wing of Protestantism, which said, which talked about double predestination. I don't want to get into any of that, but it really inspired our founding fathers. Now, this isn't like Canada or another nation. America was the only country on earth that was built on common sense principles. And from that person, that Thomas Reed, that came from that school of common sense realism, he influenced. This is who he influenced. He influenced 12 state governors, 37 judges, of whom some became on the U.S. Supreme Court, 10 cabinet officers. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I'm reminding in time, so can you please keep short?
The point is, and I'll stop. The point is, America was based on moral principles, on virtue ethics, from an explicitly Christian understanding of reality. And you know what? I think the British Empire was too. In fact, it still is. I would hope that you would come back to a Christian understanding of things. Randolph?
Well, to say come back would imply that I used to be a Christian, but I never have been. I've never believed. I've always been an atheist. So, but
even when you were 1 year old,
I appreciate the encouragement and the very warm welcome. That's very nice. And but it's not for me.
I have another argument. It's
okay.
Miracles. It's based on miracles.
Okay. This is the last set of arguments, and then we're going to go into wrapping it up. I apologize, but yeah, we do have time constriction.
Okay.
Fair enough.
New Testament historians have come to realize that there are certain things that can be established regarding the historical Jesus. For example, his burial by Joseph of Arimathea his empty tomb, his post-mortem appearances, and the very origin of the Christian faith. Now, I don't necessarily need to get into those. I do think it shows a miracle that Jesus rose bodily from the dead. But here's a better argument. Our hospitals, our universities, our institutions, they came about from Christians working in the field, building on these things. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, Randolph, but did you know that science itself came about by Christians?
Well, in Christian places, certainly where Christianity is the standard, and you can even argue that some of the greatest artists made in history made some beautiful art. You can see it in the Vatican, and what is often ignored with all of that is that it was also expected that people would be following the social standards of the time, which included being part of whatever religion was standard, which was Christianity. If you wanted to get employed by the Vatican, you had better show them that you believe in God, because there were labor laws back at the time that said that you can't discriminate. So you paid for them what they wanted. They were the biggest employers. So of course the great artists definitely, along with everybody else, wanted to work for them and get paid well.
Who do you think brought up those child labor laws, Randolph?
I think they developed over time.
They were from Christians, and how slavery ended was from a Briton named William Wilberforce. Are you familiar with his name?
I'm not familiar with his name, but I do wonder about the end of slavery. I don't think Christianity actually deserves credit for that, because there are passages in the Bible that talk about how to treat your slaves and how to beat them and things like that. And it seems to me that the end of slavery in the USA is a move away from Christianity in that respect.
But if you're going to argue that we are an improvement over slavery back then you're presuming or presupposing moral progress, Randolph.
But look, I'm not disagreeing that Christians were involved in moving away from slavery. I'm saying that those Christians who were wanting to abolish slavery were being selective about which parts of the Bible they wanted to support and which parts they didn't. And they were rejecting the part about slavery because instead of just believing what's written in the doctrine, the holy doctrine, I should say, they've made up their own mind on it. And they probably, my guess is, they probably saw the ones who were not slaves, who wanted to abolish it, probably used compassion and empathy to at least some degree in realizing that slavery is a really awful thing. And so once there's enough people who wanted to change the norms can change. If it's just one or two people objecting to it, then they're just get laughed off. But,
I'm not sure if you understand something called progressive theology, but just as science
never heard of it.
Well, just as science was an evolving process.
Josh, we don't have enough time for that.
Going
into that. Yes. I'm just saying, expounding upon that. Try to refrain.
Oh, it sounded interesting.
Well,
it was interesting. It's just like trying.
I'll go fast.
Yeah. Okay.
Just as science has a history, progressive history through the centuries, we have a progressive history of theology. People came to a more sophisticated understanding of science with Isaac Newton, Kepler, Galileo, who, by the way, were all Christians, and there have been major studies of this. There were you could probably point out one skeptic here or there. Science itself started by Christians, but what I think sophisticated Christians working or people working in this field would show that things progress there was a progressive theology. People come into a more sophisticated understanding of theology, especially when slavery in the Old Testament was compared to the cultures around them. It was a far better improvement. And if you want a book that goes into this in more detail, I want you to get my friend Paul Copan's book, Is God a Moral Monster?
How do you spell his last name?
Copan. Paul Copan, yeah. And he's actually Canadian. Okay. And he is a wonderful author. What I'm trying to argue is that is God a moral monster?
Wow, what an interesting title. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just say that I think that I do see that religion has progressed over the years. Many have, and some haven't. And I see the extremists usually want to hold it back to keep it where it was in old times, before people have gone along with being more selective about it. I also agree that there are many religious people who have contributed to science. I don't think it's only from Christianity, though. That's important to point out. Muslims have contributed greatly to classical optics because they needed to know where Mecca was in order to pray, so they had to know about the stars, and so they were a big part of developing classical optics, not modern optics, but classical ones. And
do you know what Demis?
And then China, of course, had a lot of scientific advancement as well, and other societies too. So,
let me give you an example. In the 14th century, I think it was at the Battle of Crécy in the 14th century, and we don't know where firearms originated, if they originated in China or they originated in Western Europe. But in the 100 Years' War between France and England at the Battle of Crécy, that's when firearms were first used. Now, in China, what they were used for was fireworks.
Yeah.
You see, the Chinese culture, the Arab culture, and a lot of different cultures, they had no belief in progress. See, the early Christians of Western Europe.
Not true. If you look at the history of traditional Chinese medicine in China, you will see that there's a lot of progress made over time. What Chinese medicine misses is it didn't quite follow scientific method as we know it today. But there were many great efforts.
I just gave you. Well, I taught in South Korea before. I kind of am a little familiar with Asian culture. The Chinese had had a belief that in many gods and something that wasn't rationally founded. It was the belief in the early Western Europeans that believed that God could be discovered and natural laws could be discovered. So that's why many authors like Rodney Stark and Ronald Numbers have said that science was distinctively Christian enterprise that came out of Western Europe, not anywhere else.
I disagree with that. I think contributions have come from all around the world. That sounds to me more like somebody's just trying to give credit to their own religion that may not be entirely true. I'm sure it's partly true. I don't think it's entirely true.
Rodney Stark or Ronald Numbers, they're not Christians. And by the way, they're not the only people.
Any more or less valid, though.
They're not
I'm just telling you, I don't agree with that. That seems wrong to me.
Okay, give me some scholars, because I want to give you this quote. It's a little long quote. I'm not going to give you it because of time constraints, but you're probably familiar with the great atheist Bertrand Russell. Well, Bertrand Russell
and the teapot, the celestial teapot. Yeah.
He wrote something called not the Principia Mathematica, but something, I can't remember the book. But him and Alfred White Northhead, both skeptics, and Alfred White Northhead, they were at a conference, and Alfred White Northhead basically stunned Bertrand Russell by giving this huge speech when they were lecturing there, and said that Christianity, that science came out of the scholastic period of the 10th, 11th, and 12th and 13th centuries from explicitly Christian authors and Christians working in the field. And he also goes on to say it did not arise in the mysticism of China.
I'm not saying it came from mysticism. There were skeptics throughout time in China as well. There's also a lot of superstition and skepticism. That's true.
All right.
But I think a lot of different societies around the world have contributed to scientific advancement over time. And I did cite the Muslims in early times of Islam contributing to classical optics.
I have an argument against that. Are you familiar with something called the demis?
No.
Well,
that sounds familiar. I've heard of it before, but is it one of the denominations of Islam?
No. Demis are when Muslims would conquer an area, they would let the Jews and Christians, or the people of the book, they would let them to do the administrative purposes and have their own religion if they paid taxes and so forth. Now,
the demis.
Yeah, the demis. Well,
yeah.
A lot of the so-called Islamic scientific discoveries were actually made by Christian and Jews. These demis living in Islamic territory at that time.
I would like to interject for a second and also say Zoroastrians are also considered people of the book.
Well, they gave
they were actually in Iran before Islam came in and took over.
Absolutely, and they gave algebra, and they gave things like the number 0.
Well, actually, the Chinese had those concepts as well, but they're just not as well known for it.
Well, I'm not saying that the Chinese didn't invent a lot of things. The Chinese probably invented paper before the Europeans, and they probably also independently invented firearms. But hold on, let me say this. But when the Europeans went to China, finally arrived in China, the Chinese were using firearms for fireworks, not as weapons. It's the belief in reason and progress that drove Western Europeans, these Christians, to do European exploration and so forth.
Yeah, they saw a different application. Yeah.
I was just going to say really quick that to let everybody realize the geographical location of China as compared to Europe, there is a giant desert in between the two. So it's that hampered a lot of the cross-cultural talks that happened much later with the Silk Road, with the development of the Silk Road, and after a few generations of them making money through that, then they started being more open to their culture. But the reason why the Chinese achievements in their culture is not very well known is because of that, the Gobi Desert, essentially. Wow. And the steeps.
This is just getting so much more interesting as time goes on.
Yeah, I mean, there is geographical, like really big geographical hurdles in between those two. They exist now, but they're not as harsh with technology and stuff like that.
Yeah, communication and transportation improvements, definitely.
Let's go back to miracles. We really didn't go over that. Did we have any time?
Yeah, we didn't get into that too much.
No, well, all right. Yeah, I can give us a few more minutes. We were going to do the after show on the other channel, but the Q&A thing. But I'm just going to cancel that, and we'll do a brief Q&A. And like, can you guys do the miracles thing in 15-20 minutes? I'm trying to be respectful for our guest. I don't know if he has a family or other obligations.
It's all arranged. I have more time if needed. I'm wanting to be part of the after show too.
Okay. Okay.
I do have an announcement before we move
I want to
on.
hear what you have to say about miracles, though.
Yes, that will be
We
interesting.
can end it on that point.
I have an announcement. I forgot to bring this up, but today is my anniversary.
Well, happy anniversary.
Yes, happy anniversary.
Thank you. Thank you. I think I've gotten a great gift today.
How many years has it been?
It's only 2.
Oh, wow. Okay. I've been married for close to 25 years.
That's great. That's great.
So, yeah, may you have a long and happy marriage.
Thank you. Thank you. You also. All right, let's go into miracles. Now, the majority of New Testament scholars, they're theologians. They're not inclined to say if a miracle did or did not happen, but they do concur that certain facts associated with Jesus of Nazareth are historically plausible. And I went over some of these, like the burial by Joseph of Arimathea, the empty tomb, the post-mortem appearances, and the very origin of the Christian faith. When you get into all of those things, and when you judge them by historical criteria, like the criteria of embarrassment or plausibility or historical congruence, then it seems that we have a bona fide miracle on our hands. And it seems to me that Christian theism can better explain a miracle than atheism or naturalism can. Because atheism or naturalism only has one explanation in town, which is to say that it did not occur miraculously. But the Christian can look at any event and weigh the evidence with an honest and open inquiry. What say you?
Okay, so first of all, atheism doesn't make any determination on anything scientific, although many atheists do, because there are many atheists who take a great interest in science, and that's not uncommon. What you're dealing with miracles, what explains it is there can be explanations in science. So that's what we're looking for: is it reproducible? Is it something that actually happened? Recollections from very old times of miracles, they're questionable because their science has advanced a lot since the old times. If somebody were to come to me and say, well, if everybody at the church was to pray and create a miracle that somebody's cancer would clear up and go away, then they're making a claim. They're showing that they can do something to cause something to happen. Great, that can be tested. The problem with a lot of these miracles is they can't be tested. So that's why I think a lot of the science community just generally looks at it and says, well, there's nothing here that we can use to say that this actually occurred for the reason that it said it occurred, or that it occurred at all.
Well, let me go into that. Let me see if what you said is plausible. You said that miracles aren't trustworthy or aren't believable because they're not reproducible. To make that
testable.
Well, you said reproducible and testable.
Well, if there's something that people can say, you can do a certain thing and a miracle will happen, then yeah, we want to be able to reproduce that.
Okay, but historical events by their very nature are non-reproducible or testable things. They're not testable by repeatability, because you can't repeat an individual historical event. You have to weigh the evidence for and against it. And the skepticism that has come out, especially with the new atheists and so forth, has been from David Hume, which I've already gave a number of arguments, especially common sense arguments. You have to look at the individual evidence, especially weighing the evidence against any of these particular alternative explanations to the resurrection, like the disciples stole the body, or that Jesus survived the crucifixion, or the hallucination theory. All of these theories have been shown to be implausible. What say you?
Well, there's the question is the quality of the evidence, and that's where science comes into play. I'm not a scientist, so I'm kind of out of my element on this.
Are you a historian?
I'm not a historian either. So the thing is, there's claims of these things happening. We also know that history is, after a war, for example, is very often rewritten by the victors, or modified somehow at least. The concern that I have with these stories about, say, Jesus Christ, is that I've also read reports of them having been written down 100 to 200 years after he died. Some say 25 years after. And when I think of the game of Chinese known as telephone, people just in a very short circle of 20 people whispering a message to each other and come back to the end. You compare with the first message, there's very often variation.
J.A.T. Robinson, a liberal scholar, a very liberal scholar, he has dated all the New Testament books, and especially the Gospels, within, I believe it's 30 or 40 years of the crucifixion of Jesus. In fact, the overwhelming consensus today is all the books of the New Testament were written in the first century. The latest, the four Gospels were written sometime by 65 to 80 AD, which is about 30 to 40 years after the crucifixion. But there's way more evidence than that. We know Paul's letters. Paul probably wrote at least 7 to 11 letters are completely authentic, and they date within 20 to 25 years of the crucifixion, including Romans and 1 Corinthians. Now, the reason why I bring up 1 Corinthians is because there's an ancient creedal statement in 1 Corinthians 15, which talks about Jesus appearing to various individuals and groups. Scholars have dated it based on its wording and its syntax to probably within 3 to 8 years of it. But I've seen other scholars date it to within 6 months, including Bart Ehrman. So
which passage is this?
It's in 1 Corinthians 15, and I believe it's 1 Corinthians 15, 2 through 8. It talks about the resurrection.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that I was clear on what you're saying.
And by the way, Randolph, that's not the only creedal statement, that a creedal statement that predates any of these letters or gospels. That's not the only one. When I was in graduate school, studying under one of my mentors, Dr. Gary Habermas, he's one of the foremost experts on the resurrection. He pointed a lot of these out. So there are plenty of them. And there's lots of them in the book of Acts also that correlate with the appearances in 1 Corinthians. Okay. What say you?
I don't know a lot about the history of how the Bible came to be written. When it comes to New Testament and Old Testament, I have noticed that there does seem to be some disagreement on which parts qualify as new and which parts are qualified as old. I'm guessing it depends on the denomination of Christianity being followed, or the translation of the books and whatnot, of the books, I should say. I don't really have much of an opinion on it, other than that. I'm sorry. Because you're getting into a specialized area about scholarly research on the Bible, and for that I'd have to defer to people who know a lot more about it than I do. I know very little. I don't profess to have expertise in it by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, let me give you one quote, and I thank you for being completely honest. One quote from A.N. Sherman White. His name is A.N. Sherman White, and it's in his book Roman Society and Roman Law, which I'm looking at right now. This is what he says. He says, and I quote: "For the New Testament of Acts, the confirmation of historicity is overwhelming. Any attempt to reject its basic historicity, even in matters of detail, must now appear absurd. Roman historians have long taken it for granted." I have it somewhere, but there's a Jewish scholar. His name is Pinchas Lapid. It's a Jewish scholar, not a Christian. He said, on the basis of the historical evidence for the resurrection, that Jesus was crucified and resurrected. That's a Jewish scholar, Pinchas Lapid. I'm literally looking at dozens of quotes and everything on the trial, the crucifixion, the burial, the empty tomb, and so forth that corroborate all of this. N.T. Wright. Here's one of my favorite scholars, and this is the last one I'll quote. N.T. Wright, an eminent British scholar, concludes in his massive "The Resurrection of the Son of God," which I also have over here. He says, "That's why, as a historian, I cannot explain the rise of early Christianity unless Jesus rose again, leaving an empty tomb behind him." And I could go on and on about this.
I'm sure you can.
But well, look, society has been shaped by this Christian worldview. I was even listening to a YouTube podcast.
So hang on. I agree that Christianity definitely had an influence on society. I do think that in these modern times, though, as time goes on, we see other influences as well, including a lot of independent thinking, and so it's. I think Christian influence has lessened over time. The people who like Christianity definitely make it a centerpiece of their lives very, very often, and one of the great things about modern civilization, where we do have decent justice systems by our understandings here in U.S. and Canada, that people can live together and have different religious beliefs or none at all, like myself, and we can contribute side by side to scientific advancement and the betterment of society, and hopefully improving the world for everybody.
Well, it seems that you're living off the benefits of what Christianity has done for society. Now, there's
you're talking about historic things that have changed over time. It wasn't always Christianity before that. There were other religions, and it's not just been Christianity. You've got Buddhism. You've got all kinds of different things.
What religion discovered the Americas? Because I teach this. It was Christianity. It was the drive
It was people who were Christians, perhaps, but it was people who discovered it. People decided to go out on the water and travel beyond and find the other continents.
It was Christian missionaries. That's what the driving force was. It wasn't just gold or glory. It was also to witness and to bring new people, to the kingdom of God. You made a point that Christian influence isn't as strong today. That may be true in Western Europe. That may be true in Canada, in some places in the United States. But where it's not true, and I wonder if you've read a book by Philip Jenkins, a number of books, and by other authors.
I'll tell you right away, Catholicism is very popular and strong in the Philippines, and I'm sure in Vatican City, Italy, it's quite prominent.
But you know where it's also popular, or where Christianity is also popular? In the global South and in China, the former communist country has an estimated 60 to 120 million people, 120 million Christians. it's grown extremely fast in Africa, in
Islam's
in
growing fast
Asia.
in Africa too, and Christianity is not growing as fast in China as I think you think it is. But
I'm sorry, I have to interject about the China thing. They are not a former communist; they're still communist. It
I was talking
is
about Russia. You're
well,
right.
it is growing in China, but there are things that the Chinese government is doing that is very disturbing, not just to Christians but to Muslims as well, as well as Buddhists. So it's there's with China not being being a little bit less communist, I don't think it's true.
That it would probably be best to leave that. This is a conversation for another day. Sorry to moderator.
Yeah, I get it, but I was trying to give context to why I think the China claim was wrong.
Oh no, hold on. The China claim isn't wrong. There's 60 to 120 million Christians there. We're not sure because Gallup doesn't allow surveys there or to ask certain questions when they do are allowed to take surveys there.
So again, I think this is a conversation for another day.
Well,
China's a whole other thing all on its own.
No.
It is.
Yeah, guys, you made the point.
We shouldn't go down that rabbit hole. It's a very deep one.
It's already 10:30 p.m. here.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Are there any? Do you want to go through any questions?
Yeah, I was just going to do that. I'm sorry for not doing it on the other channel. It's just with how late it is for me. I do have things to do in the morning. That I have real life obligations and stuff. So, yeah. But
microphone keeps falling off. Sorry.
Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Because I do have questions.
Let's just go straight to questions. I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
All
let's
right.
just go with questions.
All right. This if anybody in the chat wants to ask a question, like a serious question, please do so now. But as far as questions for the both of you, as far as the God having a creator thing, do you know that the Christian proposition of God is that God has no beginning, essentially?
I guess that question is for me.
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard the claim that God is timeless, and I don't know how to factor that in. It's to me, I wonder about the whole cosmos, the universe, if that we haven't been able to explore. We have no idea how big our universe, how big our cosmos is. We don't really know how long that's been around either. The idea of the Big Bang certainly looks plausible, but do we know for certain that everything in the entire universe erupted from that, or from multiple Big Bangs, or if the Big Bangs are more like an invasion into an existing space, so to speak? Protrusion, I should probably use rather than invasion. I don't know the answer to that. I've heard the claim, but I don't know how that can be tested.
All right. That was more to like the Christian perspective is going off of that is true by default.
The Muslims make the same claim about their deity, and there's other religions that I've encountered that as well.
Yeah, can I answer it? Can
Abrahamic
I try to answer
faith,
it?
so that are not Abrahamic faiths.
Yeah. Yes. It is your turn to answer it, Josh.
Sorry.
About the beginning of the universe, I think the argument, the Kalam cosmological argument, is very plausible because it doesn't seek to prove too much, and it's very modest in that regard. It doesn't argue for the Christian God or for any God in particular, but it argues for the beginning of the universe, a bland, a deistic God, so to speak. So used in a cumulative case, like I've used it tonight, I think it's a very good argument because it doesn't seek to prove the whole case for Christianity.
I mean, I kind of disagree that it's a good argument, but that's because there's properties of the Kalam argument that I think as far as the ontology of the existence of God, I think while the Kalam argument is a good starting point, there's more persuasive arguments, ontological arguments about that, in my opinion.
Yeah, just as a point of interest, if you could tell us the name of the person who asked the question as well, I'd certainly like to know, because I don't see anything on any screens here.
For what?
The name of whoever it was, the name that they used to ask me the question. It's nice to give credit to people after we answer is nice.
No, that was just one of my questions I had.
Oh, okay.
A question for Randolph by RB Tubes a lot. I think that's his name. Are you at least open to the idea that God exists?
I'm not closed to it. I've just not encountered anything that really convinces me that it is real. So I'm just at the point where I don't hold a belief. So if I was closed to it, then I would be anti-theist and against the idea of it. I am atheist, which means that I just don't believe. Thank you.
Okay, I do have a question for you. This is one of my questions. For the anti-theist atheists, how do you feel about them? Like the people who say I am an anti-theist and an atheist. Like, how does that work?
Oh, that's I like this question a lot. So, looking at atheism being the classification of the absence of belief in deities, then you have theists who take the position that one or more deities exist, monotheist being one deity, polytheist, multiple deities. The anti-theist is taking the opposite position and making an opposite claim that there are no deities. Deities don't exist. As a matter of consequence of the anti-theist position, that there are no deities, in a sense, you would also qualify as an atheist because you don't believe that there are deities existing. Does that kind of make sense? You see how the overlap? But atheism doesn't reciprocate. But does that make sense?
Yeah, the overlap makes sense, but it's for the it's something that is confusing me because it's not like a set group, but it's just certain atheists all grouped together. That's just what humans do, though. Like humans that think similarly, they just tend to group together.
People tend to simplify things, and you can think of I guess almost a Venn diagram. I don't know. Not having a belief in something doesn't necessarily mean you're against it. But if you're making a claim against a belief, then obviously you don't believe it.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, another question. This is just a question that I keep on asking atheists, and I just want to know your opinion.
Sorry. I'd like to clarify one more thing on that. I should like to add to that. I apologize for interrupting. I think that when people make the claim that the deity does not exist, the anti-theistic claim also carries a burden of proof. So I'll carry on. Go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. It actually isn't related to that. It's just a question that I ask every atheist, just because I want to know their opinion.
Oh,
but
sure.
The people who call themselves non-believers but refuse to actually identify as atheists, right?
Okay.
it just doesn't compel them to actually say I am an atheist because I'm a non-believer, because if there's no actual ideology or no actual worldview, what is the differentiation between non-believer and atheist, and are people free to make that distinction, you think?
Yeah, so those two words are synonyms. They mean the same thing. It's in the context of a non-believer saying they don't believe in deities, then in that case, yes, they're an atheist. You can deny being a human even though you're a human. You don't have to use the term. You could prefer to use the term person. You could prefer to use a more wider classification and say you're an animal and you happen to be. It's true, we're animals by technical classification, but it makes more sense for us to use the term human being, or even Homo sapien. I think there are people who stray away from the term atheism because in some social circles they find that it has a bad connotation. It can be problematic for them, and that's understandable. And that's part of what we're trying to change with the Canadian atheists, is to stop that kind of denigration and that kind of the vilification of atheists, because that's all we are. Is we just don't believe in deities. People are free to call themselves whatever they want, just like you and I are free to choose not to call ourselves humans. It doesn't change the fact that that's who we are.
Okay. Yeah, it's just something. It's interesting to me because it's always a different. It's always a different answer because it's a very subjective thing.
I'm sure there's a lot. I'd be interested to hear some of the different answers at some.
It's just this a lot of the problem with I think people have with atheists, the non-believer types that don't really want to join what seems to them to be politics. There's the like on everything that the right has their most extreme views usually are the ones that talk the loudest, essentially.
Yeah,
while they're the minority. While they're the more minority, they do get a lot of attention. Same thing with atheists. Same thing with I think I already said Christians, Muslims, definitely. That is amplified more than it should be, I think.
I think it's common with everything. It just happens.
Yeah. How like just as human beings, how do we, other than just saying, I don't agree with those atheists that are acting that way, like you did before. Like what are some other ways that you think we could do with basically policing our own communities to try to keep this type of radicalization? That's a bad word for it, but it's the best I can come up with right now.
Well, I think keeping open dialogue is very important, and if we actually try to understand what a person's frustrations are, that can be quite helpful. It doesn't work with everybody, of course, but it can make a difference to a lot of people. And I think one of the biggest problems that I encounter is a lot of people find things to be quite divisive. Like at the beginning of the show, I was thinking to raise the point that one of the complaints that I have about religions in general is, none specifically, but it's just in general, is that there's very often an attempt to divide between conformists and non-conformists. And that's the kind of thing that I dislike, because it excludes people rather than including people.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you, Randolph. I think there's so much, if we could just work together, both communities, and try to get others to work together. But
yeah,
there are some of these people that like to try to bully people. In this new atheism, I think a lot of people have been influenced by people like Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and others to bring up the rhetoric, and it's something that I really don't like. And what do you think about that?
Well, from what I see with Sam Harris, I don't find that he's promoting extreme kind of attitudes. But I think he definitely cuts very harshly at religion, and he has good reason to. He's applying critical thinking and skepticism, as are others. You look at Christopher Hitchens' debating style; he often brought a lot of humor and sarcasm into his points, and I think that really frustrated a lot of religious people, who very often I've noticed a lot of theists will take a critique of their religion as a personal insult. I don't have a problem with people making fun of atheism. I find it actually kind of refreshing to see a joke about atheism once in a while on the internet, because it's giving me some. It's a person sharing their perspective about atheism. From
that type, playful jabs and a little of that is okay, but I do think that the internet and Twitter and Facebook and other things, breeds a lot of bullies that they would not do this if they were talking to you in real life.
There's bullies all over the place. It's the internet gives people a platform where they can communicate from a point of greater safety than doing it in person. So,
yes.
So it can come across that way, and I think look at the larger picture of it. First, we had the Gutenberg press came out, and then suddenly there's a lot more books are available for a lot less expense. They can be produced en masse now. Made book publishing a lot easier, so people were able to read, and so a lot more people gradually have more interest in reading and could then read even Holy Scriptures without having to get somebody else to interpret it, who they may or may not trust, or who may or may not be trustworthy. This happens in all walks of life, not just religious clerics, by the way. But then now we have phase 2 of our progress, I see, is the internet, where not only can people just read anything they want, but they can also publish whatever they want. People can make their own websites, or they can go on social media, which makes it even easier than publishing your own website to go and express your views. And these YouTube videos here where we can do this.
Well,
I think what you're experiencing here are probably some growing pains in that regard. And I wonder if when the Gutenberg Press first came out, when people started saying, hey, this holy book doesn't say what the cleric told me last week or last month or whatever, and people start talking like that, people might have found that to be kind of offensive at the time. I wonder.
Well, there's all the printing press when it came out. There were Catholics and Protestants that could go back and forth. Now it seems what you have is a lot of PC, political correctness going on, and a lot of these atheists who get offended so easy, trying to ban people on Twitter. In fact, today, one of my friends on Twitter, her name is Eve, she was banned by something she said. And she showed me. Yeah, hi, Eve. And she showed me, and she was banned for 12 hours. It seems like we're going more and more into the need for safe spaces all around us. Jonathan Haidt.
Well, I would like to interject and say that that's not directly because of atheism. That is because of a different ideology entirely.
Here's what I think about political correctness. I think it's a vague and corrupt ideology that is creating more problems than it is in helping things, because it interferes with clear communication. There's a saying that I saw that I like, and I like to say it is political correctness is not my master. And I think I would like to see more people say that more often. because we need to think clearly about things, and maybe things aren't great. Like earlier, you mentioned something that I found disgusting. I didn't say you shouldn't say that. I just reacted. I found it disgusting earlier in our conversation. So there you go.
Yeah, I didn't mean to disgust you.
No,
That
it's
was
okay.
an argument.
It's just an example of how we should handle these things. Is not say, oh, we need to censor and stop people from saying things a certain way. I'm against that. Just like I think you guys are.
Yeah. Okay, can we go on to the next question?
I do have some atheist jokes in the chat because you did say
Okay.
you liked atheist jokes.
Sure, let's hear them.
What is so
I
ironic?
kind of asked for it.
What is so ironic about atheists?
Go ahead.
They're always talking about God.
Yeah, there is a bit of that going on. Yeah.
Why can't atheists solve exponential equations?
Oh, why not?
Because they don't believe in higher powers.
I like a good pun.
Yeah. The next one is how many atheists does it take to change a light bulb, but I haven't got an answer for that yet. So.
Okay. Those are good. I like those. Thank you.
Oh, the answer is 2. One to actually change the bulb, and the other to videotape the job so fundamentalists won't claim that God did it.
Ooh, okay. So.
Come on, next question.
Well, all right. There is a question I personally had for the during fine tuning argument phase. It was like I don't fully agree with William Lane Craig's position, but what if I was to put up this is my idea of the fine tuning argument that is good for life, sapient life, and that while there is the position that we as humans are observing it, so we're only thinking that there's only human life. I would disagree with that because I personally would think that the extreme types of animals that we like, the whale bones that was found on Europa by a probe, and there's these interesting things about what is Erasmus? No, it's one of Saturn's moons. It is like this cold ball, but underneath the ice is an ocean that is presumably warm because there is tectonic action, and there are geysers and stuff, and there is organic matter that our probes have found coming from those geysers. I would say
Enceladus. That's the moon. Enceladus.
Yes, Enceladus. With that going on, I'm not necessarily certain that the fine tuning argument actually is specifically for humans, because there are examples of extreme life, and that's not really a question. That's just my that's just my conception on it. But
let me say, I wasn't using William Lane Craig for the fine tuning argument. I was using a number of scholars, but specifically or especially Robin Collins, a physicist.
Right, but William Lane Craig is the one who really popular. I can't say words today. Popular. He made that argument popular on YouTube and on the internet and social media and stuff. I just don't fully agree with it. As he actually says it. I know that wasn't a question, but what are you guys' thoughts on my opinion on that?
Well, I think it shows. I don't think it necessarily shows for human life. I think that's a little self-centered. It shows for the eventual emergence of any type of life. So that would be a much more modest claim than arguing for the particular, human life or for my purpose. That would require a lot more burden of proof. And remember, I gave that argument from John Leslie in his book Universes. I have some great slides for this. I wish I would have used them, but I think everything we know, the emergence of the universe shows the importance of for life and for character development. So that's how I would answer it.
Yeah, I wondered. I did comment earlier that I think it's a bit arrogant to think it's just humans. So it sounds like we're kind of all heading in the same direction on this, kind of.
Right. It's just I'm just putting, my conception. I didn't want to do that, during the proper debate, because it's not really an admonishment. It's just adding an opinion that seems to. It's that whole argument in itself is.
I think it's an important perspective to include.
Yeah. Because we have found evidence that life at least existed in other planetary bodies within the solar system, and there is evidence that it is possible. Like we don't actually know what is on the surface of Mars fully.
For the benefit of the audience, I'll just spell the name of that moon. It's Enceladus, Enceladus, in case somebody wants to look it up. There's interesting information online about it.
As far as life on other moons and other planets and the multiverse itself, I think Christianity is the best explanation for the multi-universe. If there is a multi-universe, then it would have to be finely tuned also, its initial conditions to bring forth the eventual emergence of any life. I don't see why God couldn't be a grand weaver and have life on other planets. I don't think that would be a good argument against the teleological argument. Let's say if life was found elsewhere.
Are there more questions?
No, not. I'm getting I'm not getting a lot of questions tonight. Okay. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. That was I enjoyed the jokes, by the way, and that was I think this was a nice conversation. It was
Absolutely.
kind of a bit of a debate and a conversation, and I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Yeah, and you're a great guy. I'm sure. We'll all have you on again. You're very nice. And I think if both communities could learn to work together and not ban people or censor people, I like this. I like a lot of these conversations.
Yeah, I do have a question that doesn't have anything to do with the debate.
Okay.
Are you considered conservative in your country?
Conservative? Me? No.
Okay.
Definitely on the liberal side. I'm pro-freedom and all this kind of stuff. So.
Well, I'm just asking because it's the with the American left and right is in shambles right now, because you have moderate left, which talks a lot like you do. They have a lot in common with the right, and then the far left is you know how all that goes.
So yeah, we see that here. We're quite accustomed to having 4 or 5 parties to vote for in our federal elections. So this kind of distinction usually doesn't come up very strongly. Where it does come up strongly is on the right lately, because a number of parties that are more aligned to social conservatism and religion did kind of band together to make one big party, the Progressive Conservatives, who were in power until the most recent election. Now we've got liberals at the federal level. Another difference I've noticed that I think plays somewhat of a role as well, and it's a pretty important one, is that here we have a department of our government called Elections Canada, which makes sure that the elections are conducted fairly and impartially throughout the whole country when it's federal elections. But in the U.S., as I understand it, there is no such department like that, and it's generally left up to each state to administer the federal election within the states. Am I correct in my understanding of the U.S. part of that?
Yes, that is correct. It's the states that administer it, and we have the Electoral College, which is basically taking the votes.
Do you think that having a federal body that acts impartially and administers the federal elections equally to everyone throughout the whole U.S. It would be something that could be good for the U.S.?
No, I don't.
Well, I think it could be good for the U.S. I just don't actually trust many Americans that would be put into that position to actually do that. It's not really the what you say that I'm in disagreement with. It's that I don't have any trust in my fellow Americans.
Wow. There's something that was said by Lord Acton in the 19th century. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We have this sin nature, or you can define it however you want, this proclivity for power, for domination. And I think we all need to be mindful of that. And I think decentralized government is on the right path.
Well, I mean, decentralized government and how things are, it's changing, and it's not changing in a way because it's change. Ooh, it's bad. Because I'm mostly moderate left for the most part, but it's more that they're we're seeing it worldwide. These extreme points of any view is the ones that are always seeking the power, it seems. And in this current climate, I think that any type of change like that wouldn't be good for our country in the long run.
Yeah.
That's interesting. We've gone off tangent, but that was quite kind of enlightening, actually. Better to understand our neighbors better. Helps us understand our neighbors better. Yeah.
Well, it's 10 o'clock. I guess this has been going a little too long. I guess.
Yeah, it's 2200 from 17. That's about 3 hours almost. Wow.
Yeah.
And a war didn't start.
Yeah. Well, we hey, maybe we can join forces against if we ever have to. I just think if we're ever attacked by aliens or anything, I'm best friends with the atheists,
Well, I do think. I'm sorry.
I don't think we'll be attacked by aliens. I think it takes a lot of effort to get here. It's going to be a different thing. It's not going to be or something. I think the biggest concern will be, are there some kind of diseases that would come about that we need to make sure we can protect against, and them too. That would probably be the major concern there.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just think we have a lot that can unite us. We need to work together to build not build churches. Y'all wouldn't do that, but to build hospitals, to build universities, to help the poor. Christians, by the way, this global movement in the South, this is what Christianity has historically done and is doing today. So just as there's a lot of some secularization going on in Western Europe, actually a lot in Western Europe, the global South is turning Christian at an astonishing rate.
Well, I think that secularism is the way to go, because under really a good secular system, people are free to be religious and not religious, and everybody can benefit from that.
Well, look what happened in the 20th century. If you go too far, you're going to wipe out 100 million people, too. So I think you need to have a foundation of where it says that mankind has intrinsic value.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's 2200. I think.
Yeah. Does anybody have any final thoughts before we close it out?
Look forward to having you on again. I do think that this is my opinion. I do believe a lot of my arguments. This is my opinion. I do believe all of these arguments are I would still use them. I think they're very plausible, and I respectfully think I answered the objections. But you're a great guy. I hope to talk with you again, and I'm sure other team members from Red Pill would love to have you on again.
Sure. I'm game for it. I think that you did quite well generally answering my concerns. I'm not convinced. The one question that I feel was unanswered was that I didn't actually get an example of something that is an objective moral value. But all the rest of the stuff, I thought you did quite well. So anyway, that's I think where we're at. Yeah, I enjoyed it very much. I think you're great to talk with.
Thank you. I'm just so happy that I think I've met a new friend, and I think it shows that theists and atheists, we have so much more that can bind us together if we talk. If we have respectful dialogues rather than censoring on both sides, and I think this talk is an example for others.
Well, if you're ever in BC, let me know. Cheers.
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you for hosting this.
You're welcome. Thank you for everybody watching us. If you're on YouTube, you know what to do. Give us a like, give us a subscribe. Tell your friends and enemies, and God bless everybody.